You're 10 years old, sitting in your kitchen while your mom lectures you for nearly an hour about something as simple as playing outside with friends. She's eating her dinner, talking down to you between bites, treating you like you're some kind of criminal. Then she has the audacity to order you around like a servant. "Get me some water," she says, not even looking up from her plate. What would you do? Well, what I did next made her regret every single harsh word she'd just thrown at me. If you've ever been made to feel small by someone who should have been protecting you, if you've ever dreamed of that perfect moment when justice finally arrives, then you need to hit that like button right now. This is one of those rare stories where the underdog gets the most satisfying revenge possible, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail. So subscribe, because this is about to get really, really good. Let me take you back to a time when I was just a kid. I must have been around 10 years old, maybe 11. You know that age where you're still trying to figure out the world, where you're just starting to understand that life isn't always fair, but you haven't quite learned to accept it yet? It was a typical summer afternoon. The kind where the sun hangs heavy in the sky, and all you want to do is be outside with your friends, running around, exploring, being a kid. I'd been playing in the neighborhood with my best friend Jake and a few other kids from down the street. We were doing what kids do, riding bikes, playing tag, maybe building a fort out of some cardboard boxes we'd found behind the grocery store. Time has this funny way of disappearing when you're a kid having fun. One minute you're laughing about something completely stupid, and the next thing you know, you hear your name being called from somewhere in the distance. But when you're in the middle of an epic game of hide-and-seek or trying to perfect your bike tricks, that distant voice feels like it's coming from another world entirely. That's exactly what happened that day. I heard my mom calling my name from our back porch, but I was right in the middle of showing Jake how to do this cool trick with my skateboard. Just 5 more minutes, I thought to myself. She'll understand. But those 5 minutes turned into 10. And then turned into 15. You know how it is, you tell yourself you'll go in just 1 more minute, and then something else happens, and before you know it, you've completely lost track of time. When I finally did make it home, my mom was standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed, and I could immediately tell from her face that I was in trouble. Not just regular trouble, the kind of trouble that makes your stomach drop and your palms get sweaty. "Where were you?" she asked, but it wasn't really a question. It was more like an accusation. "I was just playing with Jake and I called your name 4 times. 4 times? Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have the neighbors see me yelling for my own son like some kind of crazy person?" I wanted to explain that I honestly hadn't heard her clearly, that I was just trying to have fun like any normal kid, but I could see in her eyes that she wasn't interested in explanations. She was interested in being right, in being the victim, in making me the villain of this story. And that's when it started. The lecture. The kind of lecture that makes you feel like you're about 2 inches tall, like you're the worst person in the world for doing something as simple as playing with your friends. "You're so selfish," she said, pulling a plate of leftovers from the fridge and setting it on the counter. "Do you know how hard I work to take care of you? And this is how you repay me? By embarrassing me in front of the neighbors." I stood there in the kitchen, shifting from foot to foot, trying to make myself smaller, trying to become invisible. But she was just getting started. "You have no respect for me or for this family," she continued, taking a bite of her reheated dinner. "I'm out there calling your name like some kind of fool, and you're just ignoring me, playing your little games like nothing else matters." The thing that made it so much worse was that she was eating while she was yelling at me. There's something particularly degrading about being lectured by someone who can't even be bothered to stop chewing their food while they're telling you how worthless you are. She'd take a bite, chew it while glaring at me, swallow, and then continue with her verbal assault. "You know what your problem is," she said, pointing her fork at me. "You think the world revolves around you. You think you can just do whatever you want, whenever you want, and everyone else can just deal with it." I wanted to tell her that I didn't think that at all. I wanted to explain that I was just trying to be a kid, that I was just trying to have fun, that I wasn't trying to disrespect her or embarrass her or hurt her feelings. But every time I opened my mouth, she'd cut me off with another wave of criticism. "Don't you dare try to make excuses," she'd say. "I'm so tired of your excuses. You're old enough to know better. You're old enough to have some consideration for other people." And on it went. For what felt like hours, but was probably about 45 minutes, she just kept going. With every bite of her dinner, she found new ways to make me feel terrible about myself. She talked about how disappointed she was in me, how I was setting a bad example for the other kids in the neighborhood, how I was going to grow up to be irresponsible and selfish if I didn't learn to respect my elders. The worst part was that I could see she was enjoying it. There was this look in her eyes, this satisfaction that came from having someone completely at her mercy. I couldn't leave, I was a kid, and she was my mom, and you don't just walk away from your mom when she's talking to you. I couldn't argue back, that would only make things worse. All I could do was stand there and take it, feeling smaller and more worthless with every passing minute. I remember looking at the clock on the microwave and watching the minutes tick by. 6:15, 6:20. 6:25, each minute felt like an eternity, and she showed no signs of slowing down. "You know what your problem is," she said, taking another bite of her dinner. "You don't think about anyone but yourself. You don't think about how your actions affect other people. You don't think about how embarrassing it is for me to have to chase after my own son like he's some kind of wild animal." My face was burning with shame and anger. I was trying so hard not to cry, because I knew that crying would only make her more angry, and would only prove to her that I was weak and immature. But inside, I was falling apart. I was just a kid who had gotten carried away playing with his friends, and here she was, making me feel like I was some kind of monster. "I'm sorry," I whispered, hoping that maybe if I apologized enough, she'd stop. "Sorry isn't enough," she said, waving her fork dismissively. "You're always sorry. But you never learn. You never actually change your behavior. You just say you're sorry and then do the same thing again the next day." That's when she said the words that really cut deep. "Sometimes I wonder if you even care about this family at all." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Of course I cared about my family. I loved my mom, even when she was being cruel. Like this. I loved my dad, who was at work and had no idea what was happening at home. I loved my little sister, who was upstairs in her room, probably hearing all of this through the thin walls of our house. But in that moment, standing in that kitchen, with my mom looking at me like I was some kind of burden she had to deal with, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. "You know what," she said, setting down her fork and looking at me with this cold, calculating expression. "I'm thirsty. Go get me a glass of water." It wasn't a request. It was a command. And the way she said it, with this tone of absolute authority, made it clear that I was being treated like a servant, not a son. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of her words, feeling the injustice of the whole situation. Here I was, a kid who had done nothing more than play with his friends for a few extra minutes, and I was being treated like I was some kind of criminal. And now, after nearly an hour of being berated and humiliated, I was being ordered around. Like a servant. Something inside me snapped. Not in a violent way, not in a way that would get me in more trouble, but in a way that made me realize I didn't have to just take this lying down. I could do something about it. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll get you some water." I walked to the kitchen sink, my mind racing. My mom went back to her dinner, probably feeling satisfied that she'd put me in my place, that she'd reminded me who was in charge. She had no idea what was about to happen. I reached into the cabinet and pulled out a glass. A nice, clean glass. I turned on the faucet and let the cool water run for a moment, watching it swirl down the drain. Then I filled the glass about halfway with water. But then I walked over to the cabinet where we kept the salt. The big container of table salt. That my mom used for cooking. I looked over my shoulder to make sure she wasn't watching me. She was too busy eating and probably thinking about what other ways she could make me feel terrible. I opened the salt container and dumped what must have been 2 or 3 tablespoons of salt into the water. I stirred it carefully with a spoon, watching the salt dissolve into the water. It made the water look a little cloudy, but not too obviously different. But I wasn't done yet. I knew that if I just gave her the glass as it was, she might notice something was off before she drank it. So I poured the salty water into another glass, and then I added some fresh water to fill it up to the top. The extra water diluted the cloudiness but didn't dilute the salt enough to make it unnoticeable. I walked back to the kitchen table where my mom was sitting, still eating her dinner, still probably thinking about all the ways I was a disappointment to her. "Here's your water," I said, setting the glass down next to her plate. She didn't even look up. She just reached for the glass. With one hand while continuing to eat with the other. About time, she muttered. I stepped back and watched. My heart was pounding in my chest. I was terrified and exhilarated at the same time. I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I knew it was going to be something. You know what your problem is? She continued, still not having taken a sip of the water. You don't think about the consequences. You don't think about how your actions affect other people. You just do whatever you want and expect everyone else to deal with it. She lifted the glass to her lips, still talking between sips. You're going to have to learn that the world doesn't revolve around you. You're going to have to learn that other people have feelings too. And then she took a big drink of water. The reaction was immediate and absolutely perfect. Her eyes went wide, her face scrunched up in disgust, and she spit the water out in a spray all over her plate of food. It was like watching a cartoon. Character tastes something terrible, her whole body recoiled from the taste. What the hell is in this water? She sputtered, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. I tried to look innocent. I don't know that I just got it from the tap. She looked at the glass suspiciously, then took another small sip to confirm what she'd tasted. Again, her face twisted in disgust. This tastes like the ocean. What did you do to this water? I didn't do anything, I said, but I'm sure my face was giving me away. I was trying so hard not to smile, but inside I was celebrating. For the first time in almost an hour, I had some power in this situation. For the first time in almost an hour, she was the one who was uncomfortable. You put salt in this water, she said, standing up from the table. You deliberately put salt in this water. No, I didn't, I insisted, but we both knew I was lying. She stormed over to the sink and dumped the rest of the water down the drain. Then she filled the glass with fresh water and took a sip to make sure it was normal. It was. You think you're so clever, she said, turning to face me. You think. You're so smart. And then she launched into another lecture. But this one was different. This one was fueled by embarrassment and frustration, not just anger. She was mad that I'd gotten one over on her, that I'd made her look foolish, that I'd found a way to fight back. You're in so much trouble, she said. You're grounded for a week. No friends, no bike, no TV, no nothing. And you're going to write me a letter of apology for this little stunt. But you know what? I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I'd stood up to someone who was bullying me. I'd found a way to make her taste a little bit of her own medicine. And the look on her face when she spit out that salty water was worth every punishment she could throw at me. She kept yelling at me for another 10 minutes, but it was different now. She was flustered and embarrassed, and I could see that she was trying to regain the upper hand. But she'd lost it the moment she spit out that water, and we both knew it. Go to your room, she finally said. I don't want to see you for the rest of the night. I walked to my room, and the moment I closed the door behind me, I broke into the biggest smile of my life. I had done it. I had actually done it. I had found a way to get back at someone who had been cruel to me, and it had worked perfectly. I lay in my bed that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole thing in my mind. The look of shock on her face, the way she spit out the water, the way she'd gotten flustered and embarrassed. It was perfect. It was justice. And you know what? She never gave me a lecture like that again. Oh, she still gets mad at me from time to time, what parent doesn't? But she never again made me stand in the kitchen for an hour while she ate her dinner and told me what a terrible person I was. I think she realized that I wasn't going to just take it anymore, that I was going to find ways to fight back. Looking back on it now, as an adult, I can see both sides of the story. I understand that my mom was probably stressed and tired, that she was trying to teach me about responsibility and respect. But the way she went about it was wrong. You don't make a kid feel like dirt for being a kid. You don't lecture someone for an hour about playing with friends. You don't eat your dinner while you're telling your child how disappointed you are in them. What I did was a small act of rebellion, but it was also a lesson in standing up for yourself. It was a lesson in finding creative ways to fight back against bullies, even when those bullies are people who are supposed to love and protect you. And the best part? It worked. Not just in the moment, but in the long term. My mom and I have a much better relationship now, and I think part of that is because she learned that day that I wasn't going to be her punching bag. I was going to be her son, and I was going to demand to be treated with respect. The moment she spit out that salty water, spraying it all over her plate of food, was the moment everything changed. The look of shock, disgust, and embarrassment on her face was worth every single minute of that cruel lecture. For the first time in my life, I had turned the tables on someone who was bullying me. I had found a way to make her taste her own medicine, literally. Sometimes the smallest acts of rebellion can have the biggest impact. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it just requires a little creativity and the courage to not let someone walk all over you. If this story gave you chills, if you were cheering for that 10-year-old kid who finally found his voice, then smash that like button right now. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever witnessed? Have you ever had to stand up to a bully in your own family? I want to hear your stories. And of course, subscribe for more stories like this one, because trust me, we're just getting started.